Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Science Agenda at the Philanthropy Asia Summit 2026. At PAS, we often speak about capital, about partnerships, and about impact. And today, in this session, we want to turn our attention to the foundation upon which all of that rests: the evidence, the discovery, and the innovation. So over the next hour, we will hear from 4 distinguished scientists who will bring us on a whirlwind tour across different disciplines. They're working across frontiers of artificial intelligence, of ocean conservation, engineering, and pandemic preparedness. And while their domains may differ, their message is unified. The gap between knowledge, action, and impact can be narrowed with the right intentions, investments, and partnerships. So let us begin. First, we have Professor Zhang Ya-Qin from Tsinghua University, and he is one of the world's foremost voices on artificial intelligence. We often hear about how AI will transform healthcare, and Professor Zhang has been working very hard in this domain to make it a reality. His team has built the world's first AI hospital, which is already being piloted in several healthcare facilities with incredible impact. Please join me in welcoming Professor Zhang.
Good afternoon. Very happy to be here. People talk about AI quite a bit, and I worked for industry for about 30 years, and started my career building video codec and, of course, AI. When I was at Baidu, we were doing AI, autonomous driving, and among other things. So 6 years ago, I retired from Baidu and started this institute called AI Industry Research, AIR, at Tsinghua University. We now have about 27 full-time professors and 400 full-time postdocs and graduate students, mostly PhD students from Tsinghua. So we look at really 3 areas. One is AI for robotics and autonomous driving. And the second area is net zero. And the third is for medicine, for life sciences. And so we have about a third of our professor students working on AI for medicine, and all the way from the very micro and to the macro, including the foundation model for drug discovery, and also some of the new technologies in the protein structure prediction. That's where I say, well, David Baker, he's the one who just won Nobel Prize for his protein AI work. But today I will spend the next 15 minutes talking about more macro level healthcare. And we built one of the first AI hospitals in the world. And this is, of course, can be used for a lot of things, for medical training of our students, faculties, for healthcare, and also for predicting pandemics and others. So we face tremendous challenges for healthcare. Of course, first, the aging population demand more healthcare, and the rising cost, unequal access, and also the shortage of healthcare professionals, particularly actually nurses and good doctors, of course. So one of our projects, led by Professor Liu Yang and 30 or 40 other students and faculties, work on something called the Med Agent. So this will be first AI agent hospital in the world. So the idea is very simple. We try to simulate a real hospital, with different departments, with doctors, with patients, nurses, pharmacists. It's like a real hospital. In fact, we follow one of the top hospitals in Beijing to build a simulation of that hospital. And here, obviously, everything's agent. Doctors, agents, nurses, agents, patients, agents, everything is AI agents. And we have two different versions. One, we start with real data, a real knowledge graph, medical and database, and of course we generate synthetic patients, doctors. The other version is we start from nothing, from zero, called the Met Zero. And then, obviously, we use different algorithms, reinforcement learnings, different advanced algorithms, and to learn from nothing and try to evolve. And the result is actually the second approach is even better. It takes a bit longer to converge, but it's even better. And in 2 days, we're able to essentially do the diagnosis of that big AI hospital, the work of 2 to 3 years, and with a much higher accuracy. Yeah. For those of you who are interested in publication papers, first we did this paper 2024, and then we have a sequence of publications in Nature, in New England Journal of Medicine, among other publications. If you go with AI Agent Hospital, you will find a plethora of papers in the last few years. So I will spend the next 10 minutes trying to simplify this. I know a lot of you are not AI scientists, so I try not to get into specific algorithms. So essentially now, we're using the new technology in AI called agentic AI, AI agents, to do this work. AI agents are nothing new. It's trying to learn the most advanced intelligence of humans. So essentially, you define a goal, you decompose into tasks, you plan, you iterate, and you evolve, and you take actions. And then you deposit the knowledge into a memory, and it gets better and better with every iteration. So this is like human, like how we plan things, how we actually take actions. So there are two fundamental roles in the agent hospital. There are other roles. For simplicity, I will just talk about two roles. Yeah. One is the patient agent. The other is the doctor agent. So the patient agent essentially is, just like the actual patient is trying to communicate with doctors in terms of how she feels, and ask for advices, and so it's just like a real patient. And the doctor agent essentially, give advice, and also talk with potentially other doctor agents or other real doctors, or use external tools, literature, trying to, of course, make the right kind of diagnosis, and also, of course, getting all potential background information about this patient. So those are two essential agents. So there are two worlds. One is virtual world. There's, of course, the real world. In the virtual world, so what happened is the patient agent, the two agents, start to interact. So we actually generate a bunch of patient agents. Then doctor agent in this version start from zero. So essentially, you communicate, and then you get better. If it's the results, it's positive, yes, you put that into your memory. If it's not, you put it in a different memory. Right? Those will be your negative examples. So you use contrasted learning or reinforcement learning to do that. And then in the real world, we have a real patient. So those are, of course, the pre-training, right? You build your knowledge, your database, your skills, your memory for that virtual world. In the real world, a real patient comes over to actually want to treat the particular disease. she or he starts to talk with the real doctors. We actually have a real doctor, and of course, most of the communication diagnosis are done by the agent, but human and doctors are the one who can make final decisions. So in this case, if in the real world, the virtual doctors or the doctor agent still try to learn from the real doctors, and to see, so there are two ways to evolve in the practice. Obviously, you don't need the real doctors, right? But right now, for license reason and for safety reason, we still want the doctor to make a final decision. And the agent are here just to help. So the basic technology is, the flow chart is clear, right? So you create a bunch of virtual patients. Initially, we had a few thousands, and then tens of thousands, now we have over 1 million. This is all done by automatic algorithms. And then doctors start from nothing, zero knowledge. And then you learn through interactions, through AI, so to learn this. Just like AlphaGo, when people play with the Go program, you have two versions. One is AlphaGo, one is AlphaGo Zero. You start from nothing. So conceptually, it's very similar. But here, of course, you have a lot of agents. Over there, you have two agents. And the real difficulty here is really to create that initial set of patient agents. Those are synthetic patients, and the quality of those, and also speed conversion is the most critical thing. And I'm not going to go into details, but there's a lot of innovations over there. And then, of course, the doctors. The first kind of a doctor is the doctor using reinforcement learning. We call it Dr. R1. So they learn by interacting with patients. They do the reasoning. They do empathy, safety, and also have all the guardrails as part of interaction process. So this is like the harness. It's a harness, making sure the interaction follow guidelines, do not go out of the box. And of course, here you have two versions. You have a common knowledge, and also each doctor can have his or her own experience, own memory. So eventually, you can create your digital twin when this iteration move forward. There's also another set of agents. That is the agent as a judge, right? Dr. Judge. Are you answer the question right or not, or good or bad? You can give the judge. So, of course, it is also pretty. It's a lot of innovation to build this type of agent. So let me give you some initial results. This is actually back in 2024 when we started to build this. And so we start with 10,000 patients. And so back then, the result was based on, I think, GPT-4 and a few large language models. And the white bar is the one that used the base model. And the orange bar, it's not the orange bar, whatever that color is the one that after iterations, after the evolution, essentially with the agent. And that was with the set of disease. Now also we expanded it to different type of disease, and other results holds. The most important thing is really the scaling law. Right? So essentially, we have more patients. Do you see this curve getting better and better? And this is just a result based on, I think, a US mile, one of the benchmark. And the blue line is the one we achieve in the virtual world, complete virtual world, right? And so no surprise is converged because we create the data and we just want to test to make sure that works. And this also holds in the actual world, the red line. So you have a real patients, and you have a virtual, here is all virtual doctor agent. And this also converged, not as good as the ideal case, but still converged. The average doctor, a good doctor, average doctor, would be around 65 to 70. That's the kind of score. That's what I was told. I'm not a doctor. That's what I was told. And also, with more iterations, now we have, that's 10,000, now 40,000, 50, now we have over 1 million cases. And that curve essentially holds. So that's, I'm trying to simplify this, but that's the idea. So then we deployed this. By the way, we started with the large language model, just language. Now, of course, you can take voice, imagery, and video, and all multimodal inputs. We deployed this in about a dozen hospitals, starting from Tsinghua University Hospital, and now a few hospitals in Beijing, in Guangxi, and now in Wuxi. So we try to do this very carefully because it's easy to do this with an app. But we want to make sure this is accurate and with some very, very small hallucination. One of the things here, we want to achieve hallucination that's almost zero. Well, there are cases we still have some, but that's our goal. Because hallucination in the medical world could be deadly. I have a final 1 or 2 minute video. We did back in 2024. Now it's very different, but the basic idea still holds.
Agent Hospital is a virtual world system developed by Tyrex Incorporated, a startup spun out of Institute of AI Industry Research, Tsinghua University in 2024. Agent Hospital stimulates the treatment processes of real-world hospitals, with patients, nurses, and doctors all portrayed by AI. The system currently has 21 departments and integrates large language models, medical knowledge bases, and real medical cases to generate hundreds of thousands of highly realistic AI patients, comprehensively covering key factors such as diseases, age, gender, and region. Time in this virtual world flows 100 times faster than in the real world. AI doctors improve their diagnostic and treatment abilities by reading medical literature and treating vast numbers of AI patients, achieving excellent results in datasets such as the U.S. Medical Licenses Examination. Agent Hospital has established an international AI medical team, which will strictly adhere to the latest treatment guidelines from various countries for each disease, providing patients with the most authoritative, cutting-edge, and advanced treatment plans. The long-term goal of Agent Hospital is to offer affordable, convenient, and high-quality medical services to humanity. Agent Hospital is about to open, allowing human patients and doctors to enter the virtual world to interact with AI patients and doctors. Welcome to visit Agent Hospital.
Okay, with that, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Zhang. Getting AI agents to collaborate, compete, and learn from each other and getting us all better health outcomes, I'm sure this is a use case that we can all get behind. Now let's move from the human body to the body of the planet, that is the oceans. The health of the planet is recorded by the slow, patient chemistry of the coral reefs in salt water. We have two speakers for this segment, and together they offer us a compelling pairing, one that decodes what the coral reefs are telling us, and the other acting on the message that is being delivered. First, we will have Professor David Baker, unfortunately not the Nobel Prize winner mentioned by Professor Zhang just now. He's from the University of Hong Kong's Swire Institute of Marine Sciences, and he will speak first about his research that deciphers the evolution of coral reef ecosystems, helping us to understand both the environment record that they hold and what we can do about their declining health. He will be followed by Assistant Professor Zhang Zishuai from Peking University's College of Environment Science and Engineering, whose work takes inspiration from the coral's own ecology, specifically the natural processes of calcification, to develop bio-inspired approaches for removing carbon dioxide at scale and durably to combat climate change. Please welcome Professor David Baker and Professor Zhang Zishuai.
Thank you, everyone. When you think about coral reefs, what really first comes to mind? I think for most of you in the audience, you probably think about the crystal clear blue waters and the colorful abundance of life below the surface. But for 300 million people around the planet, the reef is something far more important. It's the source of protein daily for their family, like these people of Timor-Leste who are going out for a little fishing trip. And indeed, coral reefs are bountiful. They're a larder of food and resources for much of the global south. And they also happen to be a very scary place, something that we've often forgotten about. Reefs historically were wild, and we have de-wilded them. They used to be filled with sharks and apex predators like the saltwater crocodile, one of the most fearsome reptiles on planet Earth. But when we go to our island destinations for a holiday, we rarely think about that ecological history. Because the fact is that the historical range of the fearsome saltwater crocodile has been diminished to just a fraction. Notice that where I'm from, Hong Kong and the Pearl River Delta used to be prime habitat for the saltwater crocodile, but today it is restricted to only the most wild regions. We have indeed diminished the range of most marine species. And what remains is just a figment of our imagination of the distant past. Sports like dragon boat racing are inspired by these animals. The dragons themselves inspired by saltwater crocodiles. The action of paddling furiously and beating a drum was to scare away predators while navigating coastal waters. But we've forgotten this reality. Indeed, when the colonial era emerged in Southeast Asia, there was a totally different landscape at that time. In this painting, it depicts some of the early American vessels that traveled here for trade. And one of those vessels carried an interesting guy named William Stimson, who was a natural historian, and he was collecting specimens for what would become the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. And Stimson noted when he entered Victoria Harbor that there was a remarkable diversity of life under the surface. Coral reefs in Victoria Harbor, so many sharks that you wouldn't dare swim. But the landscape was a very different story, and it was a crystal ball for what was going to happen in the sea. The forests were completely cut down. There were fires burning all along the shoreline. Firewood was burned to create the intense heat required to convert abundant oyster shells and coral skeletons into slaked lime for construction and for agriculture. This was Hong Kong's first major industrial activity, and it employed more than 400 people. They harvested about 40 metric tons of raw material from the ocean annually, every year. And this impact took place over centuries. So what has happened is that the marine habitat was utterly transformed from something complex, built of shell and coral, to something that is barren and just made of sand. In fact, as Hong Kong emerged as a financial hub, we had already depleted most of the fisheries of the South China Sea, yet we still think of cities like Hong Kong as a mecca for seafood dining. Most of our seafood is imported. And in the 80s and 90s, there was a transition to a different marine resource, sediments, sand, used to reclaim land or steal from the sea, like Chai Wan. This is where Stimson visited, where he recorded those beautiful coral reefs, long since gone and paved over by concrete. Now, this all seems very dire, and indeed, for our local marine species, there's been a major impact. You'll notice from our research that was published in 2020 in Science Advances, the range of rare staghorn corals has been compressed. They've been squeezed out of urban areas because the water quality has changed, because of the fishing pressure and so forth. And so they are only existing, hanging on to the fringes of our territory. And indeed, that's a reflection of the fact that the Pearl River and the Greater Bay Area, as we call it now, is one of the most rapidly developing places on the planet, with over 100 million people living in what we call a megalopolis, a city of cities. Despite all of this, I want to give you a message of hope. Because we live in one of the most densely populated places on Earth, with almost every environmental stressor that you can possibly imagine aimed at one of the most sensitive marine ecosystems on our planet, and yet we have 25% of all of China's known marine species that live during some part of the year in Hong Kong. We also have more species of reef-building corals than the Caribbean Sea, and they're doing quite okay. And for that reason, Hong Kong is a natural laboratory with which we can study these things. Yet, it doesn't change the fact there is a much greater threat emerging, which is climate change, and our warming oceans, which induce coral bleaching, converting vast tracts of coral reefs all over the world into barrens. From habitats that support native fisheries, artisanal fisheries, for those 300 million people around the world, to flattened, dead environments where virtually no life exists. Because of this, more than 80% of coral reefs, as we know them, have been lost planet-wide. But still there's hope. Because we have the know-how, we have the knowledge, we have the ability to conduct ecosystem restoration, which is what my key message is here today. And in fact, we can deploy restoration in strategically intelligent ways to help corals migrate into what we would call thermal refugia, areas that are going to be cooler for longer in the ocean where corals will thrive into the future. And our little technological innovation involves marrying an ancient biocompatible material, terracotta clay, a ceramic, with additive manufacturing using 3D printing. And our patented reef tiles, a product of our university research, has been spun off into a company called ArchiReef, which now has projects in Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Middle East. And these little ceramic tiles are greatly useful in enhancing restoration outcomes. They're modular. Each tile can be handled by a single diver and deployed to the seafloor. This site, which is in the Arabian Gulf, was deployed by a small team of divers in just a few hours. We can essentially repave the seabed. We can replace the hard structures that were removed from mining and destructive fishing practices, or even from ship collisions with the reef. And you can see that immediately the fish and the marine invertebrates move into their new real estate while the divers plant living corals. We also incorporate the most cutting-edge scientific means of evaluating the efficacy of those interventions, like 3D photogrammetry. We create a digital twin of the seafloor. We map the habitat. And from these digital models, we can extract all the relevant data that we need for our science to show that the corals are growing, that they lack disease, that they lack bleaching, but also for our sponsors to be able to have an immersive experience. People who don't even know how to swim can appreciate the impact of our work in the real world. And the proof is in the images and the endorsement that we get from wildlife. Our reef sites in Hong Kong, our pilot sites, are now 5 years old. The corals themselves are reproducing. There are abundant fish communities that aggregate to them. In some sites, we've seen a 600% increase in fish biomass, and we see 25% increases in the associated marine biodiversity, the small cryptic invertebrates that live on a coral reef. So we have effectively answered the question, if you build it, will they come? And yes, they will with our investment and our active interventions. But there are more impressive technologies on the horizon. And with that, I will pass my time to Professor Zishuai Zhang.
Thanks, David, for the kind introduction. My name is Zishuai Zhang. I'm from Peking University. And today it's really great pleasure to be here to talk about another aspect of engineers seawater carbon removal through coral-inspired architectures. My research group focused largely on a technology called direct ocean capture. It's a process that extracts CO2 from seawater. So first, why we extract CO2 from seawater? Because we have too much excessive CO2 on the Earth already. So it has certain advantages, such as it can scalable, and it can need low resource and energy consumptions. And more importantly, it can reduce the land and water usage. And I'm sure most of you guys sitting here may have heard another technology called direct air capture. Direct air capture, which is extract CO2 from the air. But compared to the air, the CO2 actually in the water has 120 times higher concentration, which means supposedly, if we extract the same amount of CO2 from the seawater, it would be much cheaper compared to the air. So for now, you'd spend about $200 to $800 to extract 1 ton of CO2 from the air. But if you extract the same amount of CO2 from the ocean, people calculate it can be lower than $100. So there's a huge difference. But however, if we look at all the companies or startup people working on this area, you found actually the direct air capture, more and more people working on this area with a global scale of 75 million tons per year. But for the direct ocean capture, there are only 11 companies worldwide working on this technology. And in China, there's only 1 company working on this technology with 1 ton removal capacity per year. So why this is reason? If we think, oh, ocean have a higher concentration of CO2, why there are more people working on extracting from air than the ocean? The reason is, although the concentration in the seawater is higher, but the tool in the toolbox for us to use is really limited because the CO2 exists in the carbonate or bicarbonate form in the seawater. And now, basically, there are 2 pathways we are using to extract them. First one is using electrodialysis to split water into acid and base, and use this pH swing to extract the bicarbonate into CO2, and then extract the CO2. Then we have to put the acid, the alkaline back into the seawater to neutralize it before discharging it. So the second way is we use the calcium as a mediator. The calcium looping has to capture those calcium carbonate, then you have to burn it, use 800 degrees C, which consumes a lot of energy, and also emit CO2. So based on those 2 methods, we know it's not easy. So those things are energetically ineffective. So based on this, we were thinking, can we get a clever way to extract the CO2 from the seawater? So that's when we began to look at how nature does these things. So the coral, we look at how coral grow their shells. The coral has special protein inside it, can selectively to capture the calcium from seawater and mineralize the carbonate and form their calcium carbonate shell. That's how they like to transform the dissolved carbon species into solidified species, that is their shell. Through this process, they can store the CO2, the carbonate or calcium, the CO2, like over 100 years, over a very long time period. This is great, but the only problem is this process takes a really long time, at least 1 to 2 years at least. So we were thinking, can we do some engineer work to speed up? So that's our solution here. We bunch of guys get together and to make ion selective electrode, which mimics the protein from the calcium. This guy can selectively capture the calcium from seawater. And we use a modulation of the electric field to push this bicarbonate get really close to the calcium ions. So when those 2 things get really close, as you know, they precipitate, and we call them mineralization. And through this process, you just need 10 hours to 20 hours to grow a coral instead of 1 to 2 years. And because of there is no byproduct, like lots of technology, they have some byproduct, something they don't want, but they have to generate. But in our technology, only product we are producing is something we really want, is calcium carbonate. So there is no byproduct. So there is less energy also used in this process. And moreover, like we use some modification for the polymer to make them at a micro scale really strong electrical field to facilitate this process. So which means we can now make it less than 5 hours to make a precipitation from the seawater. And also, next question is, can we scale it up? So we were collaborating closely with a Chinese company called Hongji Chuangneng, and we are trying to develop an automatic pilot line for the electrode fabrication using the material we are developing just now, from a material deposition to the electrode quality control, to electrode fabrication, to electrode assembly, electrode transfer, and quality test for this line. And we are able to make 100 electrodes per hour. So at first beginning, this product doesn't start long. Like I joined Peking University in 2023. So at 2024, we developed this technology. And first, we start really small cell, like 5 centimeters square. Then after one year, we are began to make 400 centimeters square 400 meters reactor. And recently, we built this pilot reactor, which is able to produce 500 grams of calcium carbonate per day. And we have third-party verification for the purity is over 98%. So how about the cost? The cost because they have different operating mode. First thing is this reactor can floating on the surface of sea and do the work. The second thing is even better is we collaborating with a distillation factory. In that case, the pumping energy and the capital cost of pumping energy can be absorbed by the distillation factory itself because anyway, they have to do it. So in this way, the cost is between $70 to $140. But we are confident we can further decrease the cost to lower than $60 in the next 2 years. And after generate those calcium carbonate solid, we can use a building material here. We do some demonstration to make some blue ocean creations using our logo. So last thing I would like to say is we are trying to even scale it to say the real world impact, how our technology can impact this world. So we are collaborating with a distillation factory in Qingdao, which is close to the sea here. It's the largest membrane-based seawater distillation project in China for this project. And here we are trying to aim to remove 100 tons per year of CO2 from the ocean. And 100 tons per year for any chemical production, it sounds really little. But as I mentioned before, there is only one factory in China remove 1 ton per year of CO2. But we're trying to increase this number by 100 times. That's it. I think that's my talk today. And I list my email here, and I hope to keep contact. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much to both Professor Zhang and Professor Baker. The corals embody an archive of data of the seas, and so do every disease outbreak that we experience. Every time there's a disease outbreak, scientists race to interpret the trail of data that's being left behind, yet the world often remains unprepared as we stand and watch an outbreak escalate into a crisis. And it is typically not because of the lack of information, but usually because of a lack of translation. Professor Azra Ghani is the Chair of Infectious Disease Epidemiology and Academic Director at Imperial College London, and she has spent her career modeling outbreaks from SARS to influenza to COVID-19 and other emerging threats that are already on the horizon. Her work sits at the exact intersection of science and decision-making that this session has been building towards. Let us welcome Professor Azra Ghani.
Okay, thank you. So for the remaining 15 minutes of this session, I want to hopefully convince you that we should no longer accept that a pandemic is inevitable, but rather we should shift the dial in order to detect outbreaks rapidly, respond, and prevent these threats happening, and therefore have a healthier lives and livelihoods. So, a wonderful link to the oceans here. I'm sure everybody in the room will have seen the news in the last few weeks and will recognize this cruise ship. And this is the cruise ship, of course, in which the hantavirus outbreak has emerged. I should stress, like everybody else in public health, this is not the next pandemic. Hantavirus is something we know about and something that can be contained. However, it does really illustrate the fact that you can easily get a virus that will spread right across the world within days and weeks. And so these threats continue to emerge and continue to challenge health systems across the world. So this is essentially a schematic of what we're seeing. On the left-hand side, we have increasing contact happening between wild animals, farm animals, and people due to changing environments, deforestation, and changing the risk. So we're seeing increased spillover of viruses and other pathogens that were previously really in these host populations that are occurring through close contact for things that underpin people's livelihoods, so things we can't quickly take away. And then once these things emerge and start to spread in small communities, the global connectedness of this world means we can soon see these pathogens appearing at the other side of the world, and that realization really is a case for understanding how we can better prepare and prevent this inevitable pandemic. So I'm sure everybody's been focused on hantavirus. More recently, we have a very concerning situation in the DRC and Uganda in terms of the Ebola virus disease. But this just illustrates another recent pathogen. I'm sure people remember this from around 2021, 2022, but it quickly goes out of people's minds when the news stories stop occurring. But outbreaks do not remain local, so this is the current status of the Mpox virus transmission, Clade 1b, which is the more severe, very much centered in the same area of Central Africa as we're now seeing Ebola virus, but continuing to spread across the world through continued travel and localized outbreaks. So outbreaks are not going to remain local, and therefore we really need to act more quickly at the source to prevent the pandemics. So I'd like to suggest that rather than focusing just on our tools, speed itself is a health intervention. And this has been recognized in the international community with the audacious goal of the 100 Days mission, spearheaded by the Pandemic Secretariat and various international organizations. And the goal here is to speed up the development of new diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines, such that from the recognition of a new virus or new pathogen and its sequencing, those tools are ready and available to deploy worldwide, not just in high-income settings, within 100 days. So this is some work that we did a while back with CEPI on the vaccine impact of a 100 Days mission. And we took the real-world example of the COVID pandemic. We simulated exactly what was happening during the pandemic in terms of the rollout of the vaccines, who indeed got the vaccines first, so we left that inequity in this particular example, but we just shifted back the first vaccine to occurring 100 days instead of just over a year. And what we found from that is just speed alone, we could have saved 8 million lives. That's 8 million families no longer affected by the loss of their dearest. 8 million people who would have continued to be economically productive. So the value of this is clear. I'd like to suggest that we can do better than that. While we're still chasing this particular goal, we need to get our systems in place and working together so that we detect new threats earlier, so that we can decide faster what we do about those threats and deploy the right tools to the right place more rapidly. So even within the 100 Days mission, what we're seeing is still vaccinating when an outbreak would already be into the rapidly growing exponential curve you can see on the right of this slide. What if we could shift this earlier? What if we could detect or develop therapeutics that are broadly protective and are in stock ahead of time? This is an area that is in rapid development. We certainly have these types of vaccines now for coronaviruses in late-stage development. Unfortunately, we don't have this yet for the Ebola virus that is currently circulating, but those are in plan. If we can do that, then we can act sooner and really impact on the epidemic. And this is just a very simple illustration of some very simple modeling work we did to think about this, again with CEPI in terms of the vaccination. The red shows there what would happen in a COVID-like situation in our current sort of timeline of 1 year. A rapidly developing outbreak for which there is no other control will have been over by the time that the vaccine is ready. And importantly, it will have exceeded bed capacity in health systems. So it will have overwhelmed the health system and therefore had a consequential effect on healthcare more broadly. If we can develop these preventive tools that provide less protection, but still provide some partial protection to the highest risk groups, we can have quite a dramatic impact. So we can already get these things out to prevent infections. We may not be able to eliminate the epidemic occurring itself, but we can prevent the stress on the associated health systems. So we have potential, we have the tools, the science that's in development to enable this, but the system is only going to work if the parts that are needed talk together. So we need systems and strong surveillance that enables rapid detection of the new threats, an always-on type system that is continually flagging up potential threats. We need the tools to diagnose those threats. Again, one of the issues with the current Ebola outbreak was a lack of a diagnostic. We need the system that then interprets those threats, and that's what I'm going to focus on, and then triggers the escalation, the appropriate public health response. That it means we're not continually responding and what we would term in English crying wolf, raising flags when they are indeed not of concern. So it's that bit of the signal to action that I want to make a case for. I think it's the piece that has been lost in much of the global dialogue in this space. What evidence is enough to trigger a really significant response? What would we need to know in order to trigger that we're going to invest 1 million, 5 million, 20, 100 million in the development of a new vaccine? This is the piece that actually is quite woolly when we think about it because it's very, very challenging. So what we actually see is illustrated on this slide. At the very beginning of an outbreak, we see lots of these grey lines, these stuttering chains that just disappear into nowhere. It's indeed what we'll have seen with the hantavirus, with the public health response that was associated. But then one has that potential to grow and become the epidemic. So we need better systems, better science to understand rapidly what those threats are, to take together the biology of the pathogen, the sequencing, a rapid understanding of its potential transmissibility and severity, and identify the real threats quickly. So this is really my hypothesis here, or what I'd like to suggest to you, is that we need to build that science for prevention. One step of that, and that science has really taken forward, is innovative surveillance. So thinking beyond waiting in a health clinic for symptomatic individuals to turn up and for that threat to be triggered, how do we get out into the community? What are the innovative ways we can look for new threats? Things like screening in different places. We can look at wastewater surveillance. We can even look, for example, at sampling the blood in mosquitoes. They sample human infections very effectively. There's a lot of investment in this space. There's always the next new shiny tool on the block that grabs people's attention. But we haven't yet thought about how those systems interact and how they then trigger. On the other side, we have this new biomedical technology. Huge investments going in, particularly to vaccines, a little bit less for diagnostics, and I would make a plea that they are equally important because we don't know what we're dealing with if we don't have a rapid diagnostic. Again, there's a lot of effort that's needed to bring these more broadly to be able to address the different threats that we see and to act in a very, very timely manner. Things like getting away from the cold chain, being able to store in the right location, and indeed making sure that the access is available at the source of the threats and not just in high-income settings. But I'd like to suggest that the one bit we are actually missing is that link from data on the left to the action. So we need to invest more in those systems that link the surveillance, think about what those triggers are, and then rationally think about what the associated responsible action will be for this, so that we can do things that are proportionate to the scale of the threat. So I'd like to ask you here to think about this and create the bridge from data to action. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Professor Ghani, and thank you very much to all our 4 speakers today. The Philanthropy Asia Summit exists because we believe that the science, when coupled with strategic capital and cross-sector partnership, can lead us to the goal of collective impact. For those of us in the room today, as funders, conveners, changemakers, and researchers, the science agenda is something that we can all build toward together. Thank you very much to our 4 remarkable speakers today, and thank you all of you for being with us here. Thank you.